How's it going, everyone? My name is Jake and welcome to this week's video. So while it wasn't intentional, the last 2 months I've kind of been on a bit of a vacation. It's just with the holiday season and getting work done on my teeth at a fast rate. Like, it really picked up the last 2 months. I have no idea why. But I got a lot of confirmation dates to get work done on my teeth, and it was a holiday season, and spending time with the family and all the festivities, and also just some other stuff that I don't really want to get into. It just became really stressful, and I decided to maybe not focus so much on YouTube. I was still a little active on Instagram, posting whenever I can, and doing the monthly lives. I did 2 in December, actually. But yeah, I stayed away from YouTube for that reason, because I wanted making content to be fun, and if I'm stressed out and I got all this other stuff to focus on, it's not really as fun. But I'm back, and we definitely have something really fun planned for today, because today we're going to talk about Elite 2.0. Elite 2.0, the ugly stepchild of Hasbro. All joking aside, yes, Elite 2.0 is pretty terrible, but if you're a casual nerfer, there are some good offerings in the Elite 2.0 line. If you're the type of person that just wants to pick up a blaster and go play, then the Elite 2.0 is not bad. But for those of us in the hobby who are more critical of what Hasbro and other companies do, no, it's a stinky shitter of a line of blasters. It's not good. Elite 2.0 has proved to be very hit or miss. Once in a while you get some gems like the Moto Blitz, the Trailblazer was good, the Storm Charge was good, even the Eagle Point actually isn't that bad. And again, for those of us in the hobby, the Elite 2.0 line felt like Hasbro was just actively biting their thumb at us. They took out screws, they put as many clips and solvent welds as they could in their blasters that we physically cannot get into it, but we're very stubborn. If we can mod it, by God, we'll find a way to do it. I think the ultimate downfall of Elite 2.0 was also just the high standards we had with normal Nerf Elite. Much like how Elite blasters were supposed to be upgrades of the N-Strike blasters, the Elite 2.0 blasters were supposed to be the new generation and the upgrade to many of the Elite blasters. And then many of them ended up being incredible downgrades. The blaster we're talking about today, though, is one of those hidden gems that I spoke of earlier. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Elite 2.0 Double Punch, aka the Rock'em Sock'em Blaster. Battery daddy, battery daddy, battery caddy, battery daddy, caddy, battery caddy daddy, battery caddy daddy. Gonna be filling this up with 4 Kodak branded batteries. I didn't even know Kodak made batteries, but I took a trip to Ross and these were on sale for like $3 for like 20 of them. So now I have all the batteries I'll need, at least for a while. But the batteries are in, let's hear a quick rev. This thing just sounds angry. But here it is, the Elite 2.0 Double Punch. This is a semi-auto flywheeler that feeds from 2 magazines independently, hence why there are 2 barrels. And I called this the Rock'em Sock'em Blaster because if we rev this and pull the trigger, which it has a long trigger pull because it has to do a lot with that trigger pull, that being easily the coolest feature of the Double Punch. Because not only does it feed from 2 independent magazines, and it has the 2 barrels, it fires 2 darts with 1 trigger pull. And I hope the YouTube algorithm doesn't kick my ass, but if they do, oh well, because I'm going to be using some actual firearm terms here. This has a binary trigger. We'll talk into more about how this blaster functions a little later. For right now, let's talk about the value. So with this, you get, of course, the included blaster. You do get 2 10-round magazines, and you get 50 Elite darts. Now, they are Elite darts, they're shitty, but if this is your first blaster, and you got 50 darts to start, 2 10-round magazines, that means you get to fill each one up twice, and then have 10 left over. This blaster likes to sit around the price of around $30 to $35, which I think is honestly pretty fair. I have seen it go on sale for as low as $15, which would be a steal, and I personally got mine on sale for $20 at Target. Now, I said that the problem with Elite 2.0 is just that it has a high standard to live up to, but another thing also with the blasters themselves is the build quality. A lot of times with Elite 2.0 blasters, there'll be a lot of creaking and flex in the plastic, and it's not the quality that we've come to expect from Hasbro and their Nerf products. But with the Double Punch, this thing is solid. It's solid, it's thick, it's comfy, it feels so good in the hand. It's really a really comfortable blaster. For me personally, shouldering it isn't the best, but that's not too bad. It has this massive angled foregrip looking front piece right here, and the grip, one of the most comfortable I've ever held. I'm totally honest with you, this is a great trigger. I said trigger and I meant grip. Oh well. But now let's talk about these triggers. I don't know what it is about this rev trigger, but it feels kind of spudgy. It's not very, it's not as satisfying as you'd want it to be. This main trigger, on the other hand, it's a long and smooth trigger pull, and it's long because it has a lot of work to do with having to move these barrels. You'd think it'd be a bit clunkier, and maybe for some people it is, but in my opinion, I think it's pretty smooth. But I'm talking about these mags real quick. You'd think with such nice build quality this blaster has that you have some pretty decent magazines, but no, these are typical Elite 2.0 magazines. They're not the best build quality. In fact, they're pretty rickety. They leave a lot to be desired. A lot of flex there. That is, ooh, that didn't sound good. Yeah, these aren't the best. They work, but they aren't the best. If you drop these a lot, they'll probably end up breaking on you at some point. But this blaster is compatible with pretty much any men's strike or full-length dart magazine that you can find, except for drums. I think something interesting of note for the Double Punch is that it was released early in Canada at Toys R Us. I saw a thing somewhere at some point that Toys R Us has been thinking about coming back to the States in small locations, mostly at airports, and expanding to big stores like back then. I don't know how true that is, or if that'll even ever happen, of course, but if it did, Jeffrey, welcome back, son. And now to talk about another problem that Elite 2.0 blasters had, was that they had solvent weld and clips everywhere. It was so hard. You needed special tools in order to get these things open. I'll reference Captain Xavier in his breakdown and critical review of the Phoenix, and I think they went with the Bolt, but it's just so infuriating, and it's so just, why? Maybe it's to prevent us modders from doing what we do, or with cost cuts, I don't know. Whatever it is, Double Punch actually does have some screw holes in it. It has screw holes all over, minus a solvent weld in the flywheel cage. There are screws everywhere. You can actually take this thing apart and fix it if you need to, or mod it. We'll get into the mods after the firing footage, but I want to talk more about just the internals of this thing and how it functions. I mentioned earlier that this thing features a binary trigger. That means for every single trigger pull, it'll fire 2 darts. It'll fire one on the initial pull and one on the release. I'll be able to actually confirm this once we do the firing footage, but I'm pretty sure it fires from the right barrel first and then follows up with the left barrel. And because I'm a gun nerd, I have to mention that this binary trigger system, albeit with a single barrel, is reminiscent to what you would find on an AN-94. In the real still firearms world, the entire idea behind the binary trigger system is that it would improve the overall hit percentage of the average soldier. And while theoretically it does do that, it's also a very complicated system, which is why it wasn't adopted very widely or almost at all. But that sort of idea does transfer a lot into the NERF world, because if you can fire more than one projectile, you're more likely to hit your target. And with a binary trigger system like this, on a semi-auto flywheeler, that is perfect. And for a gun nerd like me, it makes me salivate at the mouth. This is so cool, and it's so interesting, and I love blasters like this. And for Elite 2.0 to release a blaster like this that is just so mechanically interesting and so good looking, it's fantastic. It's a great blaster. Stuff like this is what gets me excited for the hobby. So now I want to talk about how the flywheels in this thing are set up. In the comments down below, let me know if you thought the same thing, because when I first saw this blaster, I originally thought it was going to have 4 flywheels, 2 on either side, but it only has 2. And I think that's why this blaster can actually get away with having such a low voltage and only running off of 4 AA's, is because it still only has to spin up 2 flywheels like it would any other flywheeler. But they're just really massive, which means you have a slow spin up time. But it also means less wiring. You don't have to wire up 4 different flywheels. You gotta wire up the 2. I think I've talked about it enough. I think I've expressed to you just how mechanically interesting I think this thing is. Now I think it's time to show you guys it in action. So, Future Jake, come over here with the firing footage. On the range with the NERF ELITE 2.0 Double Punch, I have the cans set up for targets, and in place of using the 10-round magazines, we're going to be using some 18-round stick mags, my favorites, and we have these loaded up right now with some Dart Zone chili darts. And don't worry, I took really good care of those 10-round magazines. Be free! So because of some prior testing, I already know that this thing fires from the right barrel first and then moves on to the left. But something that I'm going to try to demonstrate is that if you have a trained trigger finger, you can rev up the flywheels, fire once, and then pick a second target, release, and fire another dart on another target within the same trigger pull. And I think that's a pretty cool method of using this, but of course I like to just rain down darts, but that's not very feasible either, and we'll get into that in a second too. So I'm just gonna fire and show you guys how this works. Slow spin up time, but once it gets there, round's complete. This thing is just so fun. That binary trigger system is so satisfying. That long trigger pull and the double fire, it's so nice. Moving on to some waffle tips. Round's complete. The Elite 2.0 Double Punch honestly leaves me at a loss for words. Like, I feel like I should have more to say about this, but the blaster speaks for itself. The performance speaks for itself. It's nothing grand, but it's fun, it's satisfying, and it's what Elite 2.0 should be, what it was supposed to be. And it's fantastic. Really, if you find this blaster, you need to get it. With two 18-round mags, or even two Worker 22-round mags, this thing would be an absolute beast in a stock war. Alright, we're back inside, and now it's time to talk about the fun stuff. What exactly can you do to an Elite 2.0 Double Punch? Well, just like with any other flywheel blaster, you can rewire the Double Punch. It's literally just a stripe with really big flywheels. But of course you'd be rewiring the stock motors because there doesn't quite exist a 3D printed flywheel cage just yet, but I'm sure someday someone will come up with one, maybe Band Blasters? Huh? 200 FPS Double Punch? Anyone else on board with that? I am. Maritime Foam actually was able to get his hands on the Double Punch early because he lives in Canada and was able to rewire it himself and tested it with a 6 AA battery pack, a 9-volt battery, and of course a 3S LiPo. The 6 AA battery pack and the 9-volt battery on the stock motors with the rewire was actually able to get some pretty high 90s and then 110 plus FPS with the 3S LiPo. If for some reason you're not familiar with Maritime Foam, I'm going to leave a link to his channel in the description below. And then if you're not exactly the fan of the whole rock'em sock'em action, you can of course remove these barrels, as shown here by Carnage G on Reddit. And there's also this version of a minimized double punch that I found on Reddit by Butcher B, where he not only chopped the barrels off, but he chopped the stock off. Which once you chop off the stock and you get rid of the barrel gimmick, honestly, it pretty much becomes like the deleter we have at home. Which, by the way, I'd like to go on record and say that I 100% believe that the double punch was based off of the design of the deleter. 2 mags side by side, 2 barrels. The only difference is that this is semi-auto, and of course the barrel gimmick was added. I think it's just so goofy and fun. And while currently they're not available, for a short period of time when they were available, you were able to swap out the flywheels with some custom ones, courtesy of Wurstwerfer, or Fetwurst as he's known on Instagram. With this custom flywheels, not only would you have been able to swap out the stock flywheels, but also the stock motors. Wurstwerfer recommended something like Kraken, something with a lot of torque. These flywheels also fit right into the stock cage. There's no need for a custom 3D printed cage or what have you. You just fit them right in with some shell cutting. I'm probably downplaying how easy that would have been, but with some dremeling and some cutting, it would fit right in. And then of course test fitting and making sure the wheels spin freely. I sincerely hope one day that we start seeing flywheel cages for this thing come out, or that Wurstwerfer brings back his flywheels, because I would love to get this project done someday. Hopefully coming next month we're going to have a barricade build, my first LiPo mod, my first rewire mod, just electric mod in general, and down the road I would love to tackle the double punch. Correct me down below in the comments if I'm wrong, but from my point of view, this is a very complicated system with the, reciprocating barrels and the binary trigger. So that is something to keep in mind when you take this thing apart. Of course, you can rewire it just like you would any Strife, as I've said, but the actual inner workings and mechanism inside of here is probably going to be very delicate. And as I believe I've said in the past, the only real limitation to what you can do with modding is your imagination. So if you guys have modded up your Double Punch, let me know how. I'd love to hear what you guys have done. But even bare bones stock, the Elite 2.0 Double Punch is simply a must-have. The Moto Blitz is probably a better example of what Elite 2.0 should be, but the Double Punch does it just right as well. This is what Elite 2.0 should be and should continue to be. Solid and fun. Stuff that you can tell had time and care put into it. If some, 10 years from now, Elite 2.0 doesn't exist, and maybe Hasbro doesn't even exist anymore, I think one thing we're going to remember fondly for sure is the Double Punch, and I think one day it is going to become a classic. But that's all I've got today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I actually have been a little nervous while making this video because it's just been so long, I almost forgot how to do this. And if you did enjoy this video and you want to see more like it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications if you want to be notified when I make more content, because doing so does encourage me to make more content. Leave your questions, thoughts, and suggestions down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.